Good to see you.
Hi, everybody.
How have you been?
I've been well, thank you.
Yeah, it was good to see you. For our audience today, I want to give you just kind of an open beginning to talk about things that are important to you, your background, and your priorities in the coming year, and then we can start our questions and answers.
Well, thank you very much. If you don't know me, I have been in the telecom world for over 3 decades, working in a variety.
We may need another microphone.
Hello, is it working now?
Is that better?
Is it still? Maybe I need to be even more.
Yes, right there.
Okay, I'll do it like the rock stars do it. Anyway, as I was saying, I've been in telecom for over 3 decades. Served in public service the majority of my career, having served at the FCC, NTIA, the State Department, and now the FCC. So it's been very educational and a very good background for what I'm doing today. In terms of what I would love to see the FCC doing, unfortunately, this administration seems to be more focused on tearing things down rather than building things up. And I keep hoping that we will turn away from the partisan culture wars and instead focus on our core priorities. My core priorities are first and foremost to ensure connectivity to affordable broadband for everyone in our country. I would love to see Congress help us in that regard, particularly on the affordability side. I also very much support our very talented staff in the work that they do to lead wireless innovation, both domestically and internationally. We have done a lot in the world of spectrum. We've expanded unlicensed spectrum, championed hybrid satellite terrestrial communications. And so I want to see us continue to do that kind of work to ensure connectivity again and new and innovative services. I also would really love to get our auction authority fully back, so that we can continue to ensure that we have new and innovative services promoted through spectrum allocations. I also am hopeful that this administration will continue the national spectrum strategy, regardless of what you want to call it. With regard to public safety, I want to make sure that our public safety partners have what they need to do their jobs, also to make sure that we have secure and resilient networks, and also that communities have the information they need in times of emergencies. And finally, I want to make sure that we continue to support our longstanding pillars of media policy, which is diversity, localism, and competition. With the very prevalent mis and disinformation that we are seeing today, local journalism is all that more important. And so we need to make sure that we're supporting our local broadcasters. I'm concerned about this aggressive campaign that we are seeing out of this administration to bring broadcasters and social media to heel. So I would really love to see us pivot away from those and towards these more core policies. And I'm hoping that you will speak up, because not only are we seeing threats to speech, but we're also seeing government threatening private company decisions on labor practices, for example, which is not what we should be doing. We should instead be ensuring that we are connecting everyone everywhere.
And to that end, talk a little bit about, you have been a champion for affordability, so that as we build out through FCC programs, through USF, through the pandemic legislation and programs, now BEAD at Commerce. As you know, the ACC program expired and funding ran out. Any thoughts of, one, what the FCC can do, or what the Commerce NTIA can do as it gives guidance to states that as we undertake this national bipartisan consensus to connect every American, how can we also make sure that it's affordable? Any thoughts on specific things that can be done for that objective?
Thank you so much for raising that, since it's one of my very favorite issues, is talking about the importance of affordability. It's really important as we continue to fund deployment of networks, whether by completely private companies or using programs like BEAD or Universal Service Fund, that we make sure that these investments are sustainable. And they're not going to be sustainable if they're not, in fact, affordable, especially in hard to reach areas, especially where you need to rely on your customers in order to build a business case, in order to have these networks. So it's really important for the FCC to work together with NTIA and with the U.S. Department of Agriculture to ensure that all of these investments are, in fact, sustainable. And as I mentioned before, it's also really important that we ensure the sustainability of our Universal Service Fund in order to make sure that we can continue deploying these networks in high-cost areas.
Many of our companies have used E-rate as a way to build into a community, serve an anchor institution, a school, a library, but then build into the community, into neighborhoods, into Main Street, into the business community. Talk to us a little bit about USF and how to sustain USF. I know that there are court decisions to come that put the program in doubt and creates uncertainty. But what can the FCC do now and in the future if the Universal Service is found to be constitutional and some of the delegation issues are resolved? Give us your broad thoughts on USF.
Yeah, these threats against the Universal Service Fund are quite serious. The court threat is very serious. Where I'm hoping that, your lips to God's ears, that in fact it's found to be constitutional and we don't have these issues that have been alleged against the program, which has been a hugely successful bipartisan program for decades. I like to tell the story that I was the FCC staffer who presented the first Universal Service Commission item after the 1996 Act. So I have a long history in Universal Service Fund land, including having been the federal staff chair of the Federal State Joint Board on Universal Service. Anyway, I'm feeling old. But in all seriousness, I am very hopeful. We had a good bipartisan working group in Congress that came up with a proposal that I'm hoping they will continue to ensure the long-term sustainability of the fund, because that is what we need. In terms of what the FCC can do, besides continuing to be good stewards of this fund, this is an opportunity for us to convene a multi-stakeholder process to come up with ways to strengthen the Universal Service Fund and to make recommendations to Congress on ways to make it more sustainable.
Any thoughts on the best approach to do that? I know that, so I fully agree with you on how do you get a multi-stakeholder, a process with the same principles that undergirded USF, but then to be able to right size it post BEAD, assess what the exact needs are. E-rate has been so successful, and it's been a great model for competition and bringing more competition into local communities. So if the FCC did convene and in coordination with the working groups on the Hill, any thoughts on who should be at that table?
Usually when you do multi-stakeholder processes, you try to get stakeholders from all areas, right? You want to have the service providers, you want to have public interest groups. You want to have state and local governments, which are very affected by all of this. Given the desire to expand the contributing companies, you might want to have some of the tech providers who have been talked about as in reforming the assessments of universal service. So you want to make sure that everyone that might be affected is at the table. You want to make sure the tribes are at the table. For example, you want to make sure all the beneficiaries are at the table. It's a very complex process. It's not easy coming to consensus, but it really needs to happen. I would really love for the bipartisan working group to go ahead and move forward with what they've already been talking about. But in the meantime, we can provide some leadership and some discussions and maybe some of the issues that might arise.
So from one easy challenge to a more to an even easier question: spectrum authorization, spectrum pipeline, spectrum auctions. Any guidance, any ask of Congress to give you in the commission what historically has been extremely bipartisan, of giving the authorization to the FCC to maintain a robust pipeline of spectrum auctions, both on a licensed and unlicensed and shared basis. Your outlook on the spectrum side?
Well, it's been 2 years since our Spectrum Auction Authority lapsed, which is really problematic. Our auction authority drives innovation, competition, is important for economic growth, and not having that really is harming us in a lot of ways, not the least of which is the fact that we have very expert staff that understand how to run auctions, but we're going to lose that auction muscle if this continues. So we really need to get that Spectrum Auction Authority back as soon as possible. In addition, it's very difficult for us to plan for future auctions if we don't have that auction authority. We can't do rulemakings about the actual auctioning of spectrum, or that might lead to auctioning of spectrum. So we really need to do that. In terms of allocations generally, as I mentioned before, I'm really hoping that this administration will continue the national spectrum strategy. They can call it whatever they want, the big, beautiful spectrum plan. I don't care, but there's been a lot of work that's already been put into this. Spectrum allocations take time. Decisions take time. And part of that is because there's very little greenfield spectrum left, at least not that providers want today. And so there's always an incumbent that needs to be addressed, whether it's protected, reallocated, whatever it takes. And you need to be fair to incumbents. But you also need to free up access for new and innovative services, which is a very time-consuming thing to do. And the new and innovative services might be 10 years down the line. So it always requires forward thinking. So we're always studying, we're always thinking about ways to address more spectrum needs. And we need to continue to do that. But we also need to acknowledge that we need to think of new and innovative ways to actually access that spectrum. Sharing is absolutely something we need to continue looking at. We've seen the success of the CBRS framework, which itself was a very innovative sharing framework that a lot of people really questioned whether it would succeed. And instead, we've seen entire business plans centered around CBRS. I meet with fixed wireless providers all over the country that tell me how important CBRS was to them. So we need to continue to looking at sharing, but also trying to find new and innovative ways for more and more uses, to introduce more and more uses to already used spectrum. The commission has taken some action recently, which is good, which is looking at this upper C-band in the notice of inquiry. It's a very broad inquiry, but I think it's important to ask the questions and to ask them early. We learned from the last C-band auction that failing to ask questions or failing to address concerns actually led to a lot of loss of time and money that could have been avoided had we been careful about asking these questions. So I'm looking forward to seeing what folks comment on in that NOI and how we can move forward.
Well, I also want to recognize one of our member companies, Toronto Wireless, who's really on the forefront of fixed wireless technology and has been very successful. And your spectrum decisions, allowing that shared spectrum, and for fixed wireless, many of our companies do both fiber and fixed. The market is, and the consumer is benefiting as a result, and many are adopting, and is expanding network connectivity, affordability, cost-effective deployment. And so thank you for your leadership on that.
Thank you. You know, we need a mix of everything. We need unlicensed, licensed, shared, exclusive. Really, we need an all of the above. But what I really am inspired by is how creative the industry is in finding ways to utilize spectrum, regardless of the circumstances.
One question in the C-band. Some have proposed higher power in C-band, in the upper C-band. Any first reactions or instincts on that, or is it too early to say?
Well, I think, yes, I've seen those proposals. I think what we need to do is to coordinate that very carefully. As I mentioned before, we learned a hard lesson the last time when we tried to push through something that had raised concerns. And I think that there is definitely technologically a way to have a higher power. It's how we get there, which is why these conversations are so important. We really learned a hard lesson when we turned our federal agency partners against us because of our actions the last time. So we need to make sure that whatever we do, we work alongside them to make sure that they are comfortable so that what we do does not lead to backlash like we saw the last time. And we're currently suffering from.
So now a very easy subject, Section 230.
Yes.
As you know, excuse me, one of the cornerstones of the 1996 Telecom Act established the liability protections for third-party content and for the company's moderation practices. Do you think that the FCC has authority over 230?
So Section 230 has been, as you mentioned, so important in getting us the internet we know today. Huge successful innovations, cultural products. They've had enormous benefits, certainly to our GDP, and some drawbacks. You ask me, does the FCC have authority over 230? I would say Congress is the one that has authority. Congress is the one that can expand, limit, change Section 230. Now, we're seeing reports that the FCC is going to put out an advisory opinion on Section 230. I reacted to that largely because I hear about a lot of things that the FCC is doing only through the media, and that is what forces me to react. If it's true, it ought to tell you. If they're issuing an advisory opinion, it's because, in fact, they don't have authority. What worries me with regard to Section 230 and all of this talk about content moderation is it is an attempt by our government to control speech. So content moderation, by the Supreme Court has said, is in fact protected. It's protected free speech. And what you're seeing is an attempt by government to bully social media companies into either saying or not saying, moderating or not moderating speech because of whatever ideology it is that they are trying to push. I think it's very dangerous. I think that the government should stay out of private company decisions to create an environment that consumers desire. Consumers don't want to be bombarded with mis and disinformation. And if they don't want to be bombarded with mis and disinformation, then they will go to the private companies that provide a product that makes them comfortable. If the consumers are comfortable with the mis and disinformation or with whatever other content that they're seeing, they will go to other private companies. That is what the free market is. But the government incursions into private company decisions on how they create their product for consumers is in fact a problem and a violation of the First Amendment.
Do you want to be more clear? All right. So
Period.
yes. So next subject. Today we've had a number of panels and speakers who have come, both Congress from the Hill and from the industry, talking about the AI, the new AI infrastructure, which now includes energy, all of the above energy, all of the above broadband, and our member companies who are building data centers, the hyperscalers, the regional, all the different data centers. What are your thoughts on how do we speed the deployment of the critical infrastructure to meet this moment of rapid AI adoption and the transformation that is coming from this new technology? How do we build our networks more quickly to meet the moment, to win the race as it relates to China and our other rivals?
I love the fact that we talk about artificial intelligence all the time. I just got back from Barcelona from the Mobile World Congress. And one of my biggest observations from my meetings, tours of the floor, everything that I heard is we've moved away from the discussion of artificial intelligence. Is it scary? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? And instead, we've moved into how can we incorporate artificial intelligence in our products in order to make them more efficient? How do we do it securely? I saw a lot of use of artificial intelligence by equipment manufacturers to make them more efficient users of spectrum, for example. It was very, very interesting, and it was a kind of a welcome shift away from the just vague, generally, artificial intelligence is good or bad. And a lot of the actions that you've seen at the FCC on artificial intelligence have been both to harness the good while ensuring that consumers are protected from negative things, whether it's using artificial intelligence for combating robocalls or using artificial intelligence for more effective spectrum management. One of the things that we want to make sure is that we maintain public trust in the technology. And I think we are getting to the point where people are starting to recognize that there's negative uses, but there's also a lot of positive. So, is there things that the FCC can be doing to support the infrastructure that might underlie the artificial intelligence? I'm sure Chairman Carr would have lots to say about that. I do believe that we play an important role in that, whether it's working with our fellow federal agencies with regard to access to federal lands, or working with state and localities to make sure that they also have streamlined processes, as well as our own streamlining of our own processes to make sure that we can support the deployment of all the infrastructure needed for this great technology.
As we talk, excuse me, as we talk about AI, and let me see, is Mignon still here?
She's right there.
Yeah. Yesterday we had a roundtable on Capitol Hill, and we had bipartisan congressional staff from the Speaker, Leader Jeffries, committees of jurisdiction, and we talked about an all of the above AI strategy. So from open source to closed proprietary, but an abundant strategy of AI models, and let the market choose. Like you were saying, we've moved kind of away from the risk to the opportunity model, and then all of the above broadband, all of the above energy, meeting at the data center. So the critical infrastructure. But then we had a great session on workforce and training. So how do you make AI for all available, accessible to all? And I really believe it's through the education in the workforce. We had great companies sitting around the table, all from Canva, which is a consumer-facing retail design, that is putting their products in every K through 12 school in the country. Other major companies like NVIDIA who are doing AI universities. And how do we have an AI workforce that begins in K through 12 to our community colleges, to our professional programs? But also, how do we, for the middle aged and the older American, how do we give them opportunities to access and use and be empowered by the new AI applications and technology? It was a great conversation. I don't know if there's anything you want to comment on that as we close, but I really want to thank you for coming today.
Thank you. I would love to just say one thing. If you're thinking all of the above, and we're talking about training our future workforces, you got to make sure they're connected to the internet. And you never know who the next great mind is who may not have access at home.
Yes.
So this is why affordability is so important and why we must continue affordability programs to ensure that everyone can both benefit from the internet, but also they may be the next great innovator.
And one of the most successful education programs in American history, the E-rate.
Correct. Thank you.
So thank you for coming today. And thank you for your leadership and your service and all the great knowledge and experience.
Thank you. Good to see you.